Let's start off. You were the vice president of player personnel with the Cowboys from 1960 through 1989.
Correct.
Now, when the league popped on in 1982 and announced they would start playing this spring, what was the initial thought among NFL owners and management?
Well, I don't know what it was among owners. I know, our team considered them as an opponent, and in doing so, we tried to find out everything we could about players in their league, about the type of people that attended their games. On the first weekend that they played, I think that if I remember correctly, we had our scouts visit each one of them went to one of the games, just to kind of see, how they were presented and what the crowd was like and who was in the crowd, and then we later hired somebody full time to scout their league in case any of their players became available.
So then you guys really took it as a serious threat then, and
Yeah,
then
well, I think with the Cowboys always considered, you know, whether it be Canada or the USFL or the AFL, we always, considered that a threat.
and then of course when the league jumped on, they signed players like Brian Sipe, Joe Cribbs, Gary Barrow, Cliff Stout, John LeClaire. So they were really taking away quality players from your NFL teams as well.
Well, I think we were more concerned with the young guys that were coming into the league. Brian Sipe is a very successful.
He was kind of at the end of his career, though. But so you were more concerned then when they went
Right.
to
Yeah.
underclassmen like
LeClaire and
Herschel
those.
Walker, Steve Young, Mike
Yeah,
Rozier.
and we eventually drafted Herschel Walker.
I know that you drafted them. So did you kind of smell the end coming of the USFL when in 1985 the commissioner Usher announced that they were going to the fall league? That's why you drafted Walker in the fifth round.
Oh no, we didn't. We just we had done it with AFL players. We drafted Billy Shaw when we knew he was signed in the AFL. I can't think of the guy's name from USC, the tackle that went to Oakland. We drafted him. But our feeling was that as long as when you're down in the ninth round and in Herschel's case the fifth round, when you're down there, you kind of roll the dice a little bit, and in rolling the dice, if the league ever stops playing, or if a player gets disenchanted and wants to change leagues, you had the rights to him.
How does Herschel's name initially come up? I guess like you said, you went through a list of players. Was it your idea, or whose idea was it to draft Herschel?
Well, first of all, let me. Herschel was an interesting thing in that it used to be that the recruiting rules were very different than they are now on a college level, and there were it was kind of a take as many visits as you want and so forth, and so I had an opportunity to meet Herschel when he was being recruited at various schools in the South, and then later on, after he was at Georgia, he was on our Playboy All-American team, which I'm involved in the picking of that team, and so I got to know him through that, and he was he was impressive in Wrightsville High School, and he was impressive in person.
And of course, the first game, Tony Dorsett. Everybody's wondering how Herschel and Dorsett are going to play. The first game, the Monday nighter against the Giants, Dorsett goes down with an injury, and Herschel Walker takes the field, and quite an impression as he laid out Harry Carson. And nobody did that really in the NFL.
Yeah, no, Herschel was a very, very good player on our team, and he was I think sometimes because of name recognition, you probably expect too much of something. I think that sometimes you expect Tiger to make every putt and win every tournament, and I think sometimes because of a person's name recognition like Herschel's, you expect probably more out of him than you really should.
And ironically, it was the Herschel Walker trade that helped build the dynasty of the Cowboys in the
I would
'90s.
say that was a huge part of it.
Absolutely. So once and we talk about the USFL too, and the number of players that really impacted in the NFL, and you have Hall of Famers like Steve Young, Jim Kelly, Reggie White, Anthony Carter, Rozier, Flutie, and the likes
Gary
like that.
Zimmerman probably should be there.
Who's that?
Gary
Yeah,
Zimmerman.
yeah, defensive, offensive lineman as well, and
Yeah.
you had Hall, of course,
Right.
the center with the Bills as well. Did you think these players would have such an impact on the NFL once they came in? And it really, it's the amazing thing. It just boosted the talent level so much. That was the amazing thing, I think.
And Nate Newton was another guy that
How about Sam Mills? He would never have gotten a shot if the USFL wasn't around.
Nate Newton was a guy that we signed 2 hours after. Now, well, I won't say 2 hours, but about 5 hours after the league announced it was disbanding, and he went on to play in, I don't know, 6 Pro Bowls or something. We felt that, and that's why I said earlier in the conversation that we were more concerned about the young guys, and what happened is that they also brought to the table young guys that probably would have been undrafted free agents that signed in that league and gained experience. The little wide receiver that Washington ended up with from James Madison. I can't think of
Gary Clark.
Gary Clark.
Sure, and there was Gary Anderson with Tampa Bay, another back, right?
Right. And Gary Anderson, of course, was a player that I think everybody thought was going to be a first-round pick or close to it. But there were people like Clark that I'm sure would have been nothing more than an undrafted free agent. That later, he's one of the top 10 receivers, I think, all time in yardage gained.
Yeah, in Washington history too, a lot of great receivers, and,
Yeah.
and he was one of them. He was a big part of the Super Bowls,
Right.
and the NFL too faced this problem against the rival league with the AFL. Was there any comparisons at all? Because when the Jets signed Joe Namath in the '60s, because you kind of went through it a couple of times with the WFL in the '70s as well. It seems like the NFL's been able to stave off any kind of renegade threats.
Well, I think what happens is that everybody gets this feeling that you just hang out your shingle and you instantly draw sellout crowds and instantly sell sponsorships and so forth, and they forget that you have to buy uniforms and have office personnel and sell tickets and all of those kinds of things, and so I don't think anybody really understands the amount of work that goes into it and money that goes into it for a franchise to become successful is what it amounts to. And so with that said, I think everybody always, you go back to the old All-American Conference, which was right after the war, and they signed the Glenn Dobbses and the Elroy Hirsches and people like that. And, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to compete against the established networks or established newspapers or whatever you want to say. And it's the same way in football. I think it's pretty hard to compete, and it was, against teams that had been in business and had a long successive history, but it was built up. It was not achieved instantly.
Now, with the USFL, obviously they have the TV contracts with ESPN and ABC. Do you think, in your mind, the USFL, if they would have made some changes, if they would have, cut down the number of teams, number of games, and stayed in the spring, that they had a good chance to survive, or you think they were doomed?
Oh, I'm not sure anybody can answer that question, and the reason I say that is that what happens in these leagues is you have different monetary ownership, and so what happens is the ones that got some money overspend. The ones that don't have it have very little chance of success.
Like Donald Trump, and then you compare it to the LA Express.
Right, and the thing with the LA Express, of course, that I think probably if every player is truthful with you, I doubt if many of them got those annuities and so forth that they were supposed to get because they were never funded. And but yet young guys don't ask. And Steve Young is a very bright guy, and his father is very bright. But yet they signed, and the annuity was never funded, and so consequently they got little or nothing of the money that was coming to them. But what happens is that the Express, they signed a lot of good players. I mean, they signed Zimmermans and Ackles from Baylor, and Addix or whatever his name was. There were a lot of good players they signed, but I guess it's easy to go out and sign guys that are good if you don't have to pay them with real money.
Right. So it was really like almost like the .coms.
Almost like monopoly money.
Right. Right. Now the USFL also brought about some innovations. We had the instant replay; they're the first to do that, and they showed that in certain markets like Tennessee and Jacksonville, teams could succeed. So the USFL also brought some innovations that the NFL soon adopted too.
Oh yeah, I think I think the greatest thing that you can do is listen to talk radio shows, and most of it is throw it against the wall and make it stick. But I think you from time to time you have callers that call in that have very, very good ideas. And I think that any one of us would rather live outside of the glass tower. You're in the glass tower. You don't get to see how other people do things that eventually will be successful. Whereas when you're on the road and you get out to see how other people do things, that's good. And I think that when you have somebody that brings something new, fresh ideas, there's always ideas that are better than what you're using right now.